Greetings to all of you, and all my apologies, first of all, for not being in class today. Um, Something happened to my other school, so we had to take care of a problem. Anyway, but we have a class online, or kind of online, and what I will do today, I will talk a little bit about the Crito, and especially about how the Crito shows the problem of civil disobedience. So we read Plato before. You know all the story about Socrates and how he was in a trial, and after the trial he was condemned. And now in the Crito we have the scene after the condemnation of Socrates, and he's waiting peacefully for his execution. And a friend of his comes to prison and gives him the option to leave. And Socrates refuses to leave, and he wants to remain in prison. And Crito doesn't really understand what happens to Socrates, and Socrates tries to explain to him from the beginning. And the way he explains it is by reminding Crito that they have always agreed with the idea that you should never do harm to other people regardless of what they have done to you. And Crito says, well, yes, we have agreed to this, but now the laws have harmed you. And because the laws have harmed you, you should actually harm them back. The problem of this dialogue is, as I mentioned, I think, if I remember correctly, civil disobedience, because it creates a conflict between my duty to always respect the law and my duty to always follow what I think is the moral thing to do, or to always do what I think is the moral thing to do. And the question of civil disobedience goes this way: or should I follow the law, even if the law requires me to act against my own interest? Or should I follow the law if the law requires me to act in ways that I deem to be immoral? Socrates, when Crito encourages him to leave, says, I should never harm any other one, regardless of what they have done to me. But Crito does not understand, as I mentioned before, mainly because he comes from a peculiar understanding of justice, an understanding of justice that is shared by the majority of the Greeks, and that is, help your friends, harm your enemies. So for the Greeks, and if you think about it, this idea has been shared by the majority of people throughout history. So for the Greeks, in order for me to act just, is to treat others the way in which they deserve to be treated. If they harm me, they deserve to be harmed back. If they benefited me, they deserve to be benefited as well. So if you do something good to me, I am required, morally speaking, to help you. If you harm me, I am required, morally speaking, to harm you back. So I'm not saying that I will be inclined to harm you, or you do something bad to me, and because of that, I feel some sort of anger towards you, which leads me towards revenge. It's not only that; it's rather the requirement to harm you back, because this is the expectation people will have from me if I act justly. And Socrates says, well, this doesn't seem to be appropriate, and he has this belief because there is a prior belief that he assumes, and that is that a good human being cannot be harmed. So you have it in the text, and you remember probably from the Apology as well, the good man cannot be harmed, Socrates says. And of course, the whole problem is, what does it mean to be a good man? Or what does it mean to be a good human being? Because certainly if you cut my hand, something from me, from my body, is going to be harmed. So how could Socrates even say that he cannot be harmed, even if he's waiting for his own death? And that, in principle at least, means the ultimate harm that a human being can experience. Well, this question we'll discuss more in class when we return, that is on Monday. But think more about this issue. What kind of reasons would I have to obey the law if the law requires me to do things that I seem to understand as being immoral? So if I live in a society in which the government gives laws that are going to be in contradiction with morality, should I follow the laws because that's the right thing to do, or should I follow what I think moral requirements tell me to do? I'm not asking you whether it's going to be preferable for me to follow the law, or whether I would be inclined to follow the law because following the law may be in my advantage, but rather whether I am morally required to follow the law regardless of what the law says. And in the dialogue, Plato doesn't go straight to this perspective. At the beginning, he says the understanding of, well, he doesn't say it, like this, as I say it, because as you know already, Plato is giving us various opinions so we can actually try to figure an idea on our own. But he says at the beginning, through Socrates' voice, Socrates' mouth, that we should always do good things to others regardless of what they do to us. And when he claims that, he seems to introduce a new understanding of justice. The just thing to do in a society is not to pay with exactly what you have received, but rather to always benefit others regardless of how others treat you. But since this idea is not defended, and since even if apparently Crito has agreed to it in the past, he no longer disagrees to it, Socrates goes to a different perspective and tries to explain to Crito why he should always follow the law, so obey the law, stay in prison, even if the law has done something that harms him. And the arguments he offers could be described as Socrates' contractarianism. What's the meaning of that? The main point of the whole dialogue he has with the laws, one of the main points, let me put it this way, is that as long as he, Socrates, lived in Athens for his entire life, he has made a contract with the laws, which also means that he has accepted them throughout his life. Once he accepted the laws, it would be very hard to say that I have to reject them only because at a certain moment in my life, the laws themselves will be in my will bring my death, or will be against me. So the right thing to do would be to follow the contract. The other thing that Socrates emphasizes is that if he doesn't obey the laws, it does not only produce a harm of a certain law, but rather he harms the entire legal system. If I place myself in a state of nature, I would call it, against the law, why? Because I'm no longer defended by any kind of law, then I claim that the legal system should not be a value, or should not be accepted. But Socrates doesn't say that ever, he doesn't say that a legal system should not be accepted, even if he does not agree with the law. And he claims in the trial, if you remember, that if the jurors will let him free, he will continue to do what he has done and for which he was accused. So Socrates has a dual perspective about how to follow the law. And on the one hand, if a law seems to say something that is immoral, or gives some sort of predicaments that would be in contradiction with his views, he will follow his views. But if that leads to his punishment, he will also accept the punishment. Anyway, so what I would like you to discuss in your comments are, first of all, how you think that the problem of civil disappearance appears from what we discussed now in the 9 minutes apparently, and from the text itself. And at the same time, what do you think is the right action for Socrates when Crito encourages him to leave? Is it morally right for him to stay in prison, or is it morally right for him to leave? And Crito himself offers some reasons for why Socrates should leave, including the fact that he would defend his kids, or he would help his kids, and so on. And Socrates offers reasons for why he should stay in prison. Thank you. See you soon, or actually on Monday. We'll have a quiz on Monday.